3-hour tour, a 3-hour tour.
Is it over? Huh? Is it? Is it? Huh? Huh?
I've been down here so long. What's it like up there? Are people still the same with their funny ways?
Go on, Fed. Tell me of the world. Have my sons grown strong and sturdy? Do people now wear aluminum clothing? Has man finally colonized the red planet?
Oh, that just kept going, huh?
Yeah, man, they really wanted us to feel like we were on a 10-year journey with them. Huh, all right. So, where were we? Oh, yes, welcome back to the Drive Home Reviews podcast, where I review the movies that I have just seen as I am journeying home from the theater. And today we are going to be discussing Christopher Nolan's latest cinematic opus, The Odyssey. Clearly a labor of love project, something that he's been trying to get off the ground for a while, and now after the Oscar and Oppenheimer, he has the clout, he can finally kind of do it. So there's a lot to get into, but I really hate this. I really hate that I have to do this. But first, before we can have a legitimate discussion about the merits and the failings of this particular motion picture, we need to take a second, and yes, we need to address the bad faith criticism being lobbed at this film by certain members of society. For privacy's sake, let's call them MAGA conservative assholes. Let's do that. And I cannot stress how much I hate having to do this. There is a part of me that just wants to say, ignore it, push it to the side. These people, half of them are trolls who are just doing this because they know it gets a reaction, so by validating these statements, you're just giving them what they want, and we'd all just be better off if we just ignored it. But the other part of me says that you can't ignore things like this. When you hear shit like this, you have to confront it, and you have to be a voice against it, because by ignoring it, you're essentially saying you support it. And I can be accused of many things, and I have been accused of many things, but one thing I refuse to be lumped in with is these shitheads. So, yes, it appears that much like I did with the Supergirl movie, and just based on the world that we live in, I now have to once again take time out from my regularly scheduled review to address some of the criticisms lobbed at this thing. In a segment, yes, this happens so fucking often, I'm just going to make it a regular segment on the show. A segment which I am affectionately calling,
Would you people get a life?
Okay, so there are a couple criticisms I've heard of this that I will get into because they are actually criticisms of the filmmaking process, so I'll hold off on those till later. Let's talk about the two most stupid ones. First of all, yes, ladies and gentlemen, hide the children, because there is a trans person in this movie. Yes, Elliot Page, formerly Ellen Page, who came out as trans some years ago. This is actually one of the first things I've seen them in a very long time, and I don't know if I'm using the proper pronouns for them, and if I'm not, I apologize. I'm trying to do this correctly and show respect to them, but, anyway. Yes, the fact that Elliot Page has a role in this movie. Keep in mind that the complaint is not even that they have a big role in this movie. It's not like them being a trans person has any kind of bearing on the movie. It's not a plot point. It's not thematic. It's not anything like that. It's just, he is just a person, a character in this movie. Not even a very big character. Thematically a fairly important one, but in terms of screen time, barely any. In a 3-hour movie, like this, this character is given what is essentially a tablespoon out of the ocean of screen time. And it's not even the fact that this film deals with any kind of trans issue, it's the fact that a trans person just exists. That's the ugliest part of this. It's not even a fact that it's some kind of woke film about trans or trans politics or anything like that. It's simply the fact this person exists that they have a problem with. And my response to that is, shut the fuck up. Why do you fucking care? We really have to examine that, folks. You really need to examine this. Why do you fucking care that this person is trans? How does that affect your life? What does it do to your existence? Absolutely dog shit. It does nothing. You're hating on this person for being. Just let it go, for fuck's sake. So we've got that issue. And then we've got the other one that, yes, that there are 2 black women or women of color in prominent roles in this film as Helen of Troy and the goddess Aphrodite. First of all, no, Zendaya is not playing Aphrodite. I will get into that shortly, because again, that is a thematic element that I do want to talk about, and I like the way it was done. But it's more the fact that a black woman is playing Helen of Troy, and and the evil of that's not historically accurate. That's not true to the real poem. And once again, I must say, shut the fuck up. What gets me, the real insidious nature about this is just like the deeper ugliness of the Elliot Page issue. The deeper ugliness here is not just complaining that a black woman is playing Helen of Troy, because that's not historically accurate. But it's the fact that you are mad she's playing Helen of Troy, that you are essentially saying a black woman could not be a woman so beautiful that people would go to war for her. That is what you are essentially saying. That is what your racism is. That's how deep and ugly your racism goes. And, I don't want to piss on anybody's parade here, but if they had cast this historically accurate or culturally accurate, a lot of the skin tones are going to be closer to hers than they are to Matt Damon, Charlize Theron, Tom Holland, or Anne Hathaway. They're Greek. They're darker. All right? They'd all look more like John Leguizamo, who's in this movie. Notice nobody's bitching about that. That's kind of interesting. At least I haven't heard any. It's the women cast, as Helen of Troy and everything. That's what people have problems with. Yeah, really interesting, that, isn't it? So that leads to a whole other thing of sexism. Yeah. And you know what I also love? I love how, just like with the Little Mermaid remake, I love how all of a sudden every MAGA shithead and their brother is somehow a historic and literary professor. Now all of a sudden they are deeply offended and trying to stand up for the integrity of this important piece of literary history. Fuckhead, you did not read the Odyssey. Your inbred ass can barely read Go Dog Go. Okay? Do not pretend like you are trying to uphold the story as originally written. Fuck you. So, if you are among the people who have a problem with this, either one of these two issues that I have just raised, if you are among them, again, if you're one of the trolls, I can't help you. Nobody can help you. You're just dying for attention. So there's nothing I can say that is going to help you. But to the people who actually are upset about this, truthfully, I invite you, nay, I encourage you to please go fuck yourself. And I am not saying that as an insult. I am offering that as a legitimate piece of advice. Go fuck yourself. Please take the edge off a little bit. Because why is your life so devoid of meaning and happiness that you have to go at something you haven't seen and raise this hullabaloo? Trust me, jerk off. You're gonna feel better. Okay? Just fuck. And you know, here's what really makes me mad about all of this. Aside, of course, from the latent transphobia, racism, sexism, and, you know, the whole thing of showing the darkest aspects of human nature come to light. You know, after that, what makes me mad about this is I have now had to spend Lord knows how much amount of time debunking these arguments. I am attempting to give an impartial review of this movie as I saw it. And spoiler alert, that review is going to be largely in the negative. And just like it was with the Supergirl film, I feel that I now have to take time out of my life to point out how stupid these people are, so that when I give my negative opinions on this film, I hope that I have successfully distanced myself enough to make it clear that these are, to the best of my ability, impartial opinions based on my understanding of plot, of character, of filmmaking, of storytelling, and not based on some racist, transphobic, sexist bigotry. And that pisses me off that I have to make that. I have to loudly declare I am not one of these. It gets so tiring having to constantly remind people that you're not in that camp. Okay? All right, so I rant over.
I hate you all so much! I'm sorry, it's my problem. I'll deal with it.
Okay, so now that we've covered that, let's actually get into the movie. So as I've said, I am going to be going over my biggest problems with this film. But before I do that, I do want to talk about the things I liked, because unlike some other films, this is not a bad movie. It's just not a successful one from my perspective. And there are a lot of things that are very good about it and things that I really, really enjoyed. And first of all, we have to say that Christopher Nolan, despite anything else you might say about him, he is an incredibly gifted filmmaker. He has an immaculate eye for composition and editing and tone and mood. I am also deeply respectful of his preferences towards practical on-screen effects. He will use CGI when it is necessary, but he much prefers having things live and as they happen, which I have huge respect for. I feel that's another thing that he has a great eye for, and in that is his eye towards detail. This is a very detailed movie. This is a film that you literally can use the phrase, they don't make them like this anymore. This is a huge callback to the golden age of Hollywood, when these massive epics, things like Cleopatra and the Ten Commandments, Cecil B. DeMille type films, and you can see it in the DNA. It has a cast of thousands. It's dealing with this huge historical element. The costumes, the sets, everything is so massive. And part of what made those films feel so epic is the fact that, yes, they had to do all of that. They had to physically have that many extras. They had to have that huge of sets. They had to do it all to get the appropriate scale. And as an audience member, that really sucks you into it. It feels more real and more tangible than something, and I love these movies, so don't get me wrong, than say something like the Marvel movies, which are great and they're popcorn films and I love them, but they're shot a lot on green screen, guys. You can't get away from it. Avengers Endgame, that huge, amazing, epic fight, which is phenomenal and took a lot of filmmaking genius, but it's at least 50% CGI, if not more. So there's a marked difference between seeing that and seeing this and going, wow, he did almost all of that live in camera. Further adding to the immersive nature, like I said, are the details. This film is highly detailed, and that's really important with these epics. Again, I'll mention things like, say, Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, even Black Panther. You know why the first Black Panther feels so big? Because Ryan Coogler was so specific in his details. Every little thing was thought about and had a choice behind it. Same with Sinners, a much smaller film, but the details in it are so exact that it makes the world feel tangible. And this movie really does that. Like, it feels epic and real and bigger than life. I also like, I like when you can clearly see really important directorial choices, and it's very clear why they were made. So, for instance, there are just a couple that came out that I really, really enjoyed. I love how Agamemnon, this is the king who called all of the Greeks to war, who called Odysseus and all of them to war under the guise of going to get Helen back and all of that. I love how he is never seen. His face is never shown. He's always in this very impressive, Darth Vader armor. And even in a scene where he goes home and his armor's being removed, we never see his face. He's never given a real human presence. And I thought that was a really clever choice, especially to kind of make this comment. This is what I think he's saying, that, these guys who call people to war under false pretenses, they are these large, looming, nameless, almost inhuman figures that basically tell the foot soldiers, you're going to go to war and die for this for whatever reason I want. And by not giving him a face, a human, visage to kind of latch onto, he's just this always dark, looming figure. I thought that was a really, really good choice. I also really liked how one of the choices that really stuck out to me. So one of the perils of Odysseus as he travels is, of course, going through the island of the Sirens. That's one of the big parts. For the uninitiated, the Sirens are women who sing this beautiful song, the Siren Song, that causes sailors to drift towards them and smash on the rocks and sink and die. Okay? And I love the way that sequence is handled. You never see the sirens. You see shapes kind of off in the distance. and you never hear the song. You, as the audience, the characters put wax in their ears, except for Odysseus, who ties himself to the mast so he can hear it, for, you know, because he wants to be the one person that did. So we are in the point of view of the other sailors. When they put the wax in their ears, the sound goes very muffled. You hear like you do when you put earplugs in. You can hear kind of the, you know, everybody sounds like, you know, one of Charlie Brown's teachers. And all we have then is Matt Damon reciting back what the siren song sounded like. And what he describes is so visceral and so beautiful and horrifying. It's something that you could never live up to if you showed it. You could never have satisfied everyone. It's almost like, it reminds me a little bit of Maris back on Frasier, for all my 90s kids who remember that awesome show. Maris, Niles' wife, who is never seen but is always talked about, and the creators were going to bring her in, but eventually they said that all the descriptions and all the stories that had been told about Maris were so outlandish and so ridiculous that you could never meet an audience's expectation as to what this person would actually look like. So they just chose to keep it a mystery. Sometimes less is more, and I think that was a really, really good idea. So one of the other criticisms lobbed at this movie was the use of modern language and everybody talking with essentially American accents and using words like dad and mom and daddy. That didn't bother me. I thought it was going to, and the first time Tom Holland called, you know, Matt Damon dad, yeah, it sounded a little weird, but as the film went on, it really didn't bug me at all. Matter of fact, I think it was a choice, because again, Christopher Nolan is one of these directors that doesn't do anything without a choice. I think it's an attempt to make this very long poem accessible to a wider audience. I think it's to bring the thematic elements closer to the majority of people who are going to be seeing this movie. So I really didn't have a problem with it. I really didn't. So yeah, but one of the things I really loved, and this is a choice that almost changed my mind about this movie, almost, I want to stress that, is one of the major thematic elements that they bring in at the end. So I saw somebody else say that, you know, you don't need to put a spoiler warning in for this because it's a 3,000-year-old story, you know, and they follow it fairly faithfully. But I do think that this is not so much a twist as it is character revelation, but it's one that does kind of reframe how everything leading up to it should be perceived. And I do think it's one of those moments that recontextualizes all the rest of the film. So I do want you to experience that for yourselves. So for that reason, I am going to put the spoiler warning up for this next bit.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert.
Maybe say spoiler before you give away the end of a movie, okay?
Okay, so the thing I loved the most about this is the revelation of one of the biggest driving themes and character motivations that we get at the end. Now, for the uninitiated, I'm sure most people are familiar with the idea of the Trojan horse, okay? The horse that the Greeks built, they hid inside, they left it as a peace offering for the Trojans took it inside, the Greeks came out, ambushed the city, and wiped out Troy. Okay? Fairly famous, everybody knows that story, so I'm not giving anything away, alright? What it is revealed at the end, and throughout the entire movie, the thing that Matt Damon is hiding is that he doesn't want to go home for some reason, even though he has a wife and son waiting for him. And what is revealed finally at the end is what's been going on in his heart, in his mind. One of the things that they keep bringing up in this movie is the concept of Zeus's law. The thing of you never turn a person away. You don't kill your host at dinner. These things that anger the gods, right? And basically what Odysseus feels is that since he was the one who came up with the idea for the Trojan horse, that he broke one of the most important elements of Zeus's law. He offered peace and lied, and used that offering of peace as a way to murder everybody. And henceforth, all of the bad shit that has been happening to him on his journey home is the resulting punishment for that. To watch his men die, to not be able to save them, to be kept away from his loved ones, the realization of his own guilt. So essentially, to put this in more modern mythological terms, basically he did a red wedding, and all of the shit that happened after this is winter coming for House Frey. That is an incredibly interesting and fascinating and really, really engaging revelation. I really liked that, and as I said, it almost shifted my view on this film. I once that happened and I started to kind of recontextualize everything that had happened previously, it kind of made me think of my earlier criticisms and go, oh, well, maybe now viewed through that lens, maybe that's why they did this. So that helped. However,
my brother once told me that nothing someone says before the word but really counts. But.
So, all that being true and all that being said, we need to talk about what doesn't work about this movie. And unfortunately, it's a big, big deal. At least to me. Maybe to other people it won't be. But to me, it was a pretty big honking deal that took this from being an epic tale of war and redemption and magic and monsters and all of this, and really made it feel like a 10-year journey into torture. I've said this before, and I'll say it again, that Christopher Nolan is an amazing technical filmmaker. Just brilliant. But his weakness is characters. And particularly the type of acting that he seems to want from his performers in his films. That his characters are 201 almost. Very flat, very monotone, not a lot of emotion. There's not a lot of human connection to hang anything on. And this is especially difficult when that instance bumps up against the text that you're adapting. Now, I do not claim to be an expert in Greek literature. All right, let me state that. However, what I will say is I have spent a lot of time studying and teaching Greek drama. So I feel like I can speak with somewhat, if not authority, then at least experience on this. And that is that Greek writing, Greek heroes, Greek characters are larger than life. They are big. All right? Their flaws are massive. Their heroic deeds are huge, but as are their egos and their faults. That is essential to Greek drama. Okay? Again, not an expert, but just from what I know and what I've taught, that is a key component to the story. So why then is Odysseus just so flat and lifeless? Why does the tale of seeing and experiencing and surviving all of these horrific things just feel like Tuesday to him. The characterization Matt Damon has in this is sit there and look stone-faced. That's it. That is his characterization through all of this. And I'm sorry, that makes the Odyssey, the journey, unbelievably boring and impossible to get any kind of connection with. I mentioned Christopher Nolan's, this movie is a throwback to things like the Cecil B. DeMille films. Well, Cecil B. DeMille cast his films with huge charismatic actors and let them be huge and charismatic. Another example, Hitchcock. Alfred Hitchcock did not have a lot of time for actors. He didn't have a lot of time for them. He did not like giving acting direction. He was another one who was an extreme technical genius in the way he told stories. And actors were just another piece of that. But his stories were always very big, like Greek myths, and the actors he got, especially the ones he worked with multiple times, Cary Grant, Ingrid Bergman, Grace Kelly, Jimmy Stewart, were very big and charismatic, and they were allowed to be. Matt Damon is an incredibly charismatic person, an actor. This is a guy who, in The Martian, had to do almost all of his scenes on his own and held our interest, made that character someone we wanted to root for. In Air, his character, the whole point of that movie is trying to design a motherfucking shoe. But he had us. His natural charisma and likability bled through, and it hooked us. And here you have this incredibly charismatic actor, and yes, I am Odysseus. Yes, here we go. Yay. And honestly, that's how all of the trials, all of the different things that he experiences on this journey, that's how they're all treated. Just with this ho-hum, that was a thing. Yeah, I mean, you encounter a motherfucking cyclops. Okay? Your men are turned into pigs and then turned back, and all of them are like, well, that was a thing. You wonder what it was like if any of these guys actually did make it back to, back home, and, they go home, hey, honey, how was the war? Well, I got turned into a pig, and then back again. That was a little weird, And the sequence of that is done in this horrific, I haven't seen anything that terrifying since Pinocchio and the boys being turned into donkeys. It's horrific, it's scary, but these guys, they come out of it like, well, okay, got turned into a pig, back on the boat, here we go. And I understand that, some people come at me with, well, that's the world they live in. They live in a world of monsters and gods and, witches, and these things aren't out of the ordinary for them. Okay, fair enough. Couple examples: Lord of the Rings, cave trolls, mountain giants, all that shit. That exists in their world. But when they see it, they're still like, holy shit, that's a fucking cave troll. Harry Potter, same thing. They live in a world with giants and basilisks and hippogriffs and all this shit. And when they see it, they treat it with the proper kind of awe and wonder. Holy fuck! I live in a world that has things like, anacondas, giant motherfucking snakes, my worst nightmare, or blue whales. These are common. They exist. They're documented. But if I ever came face to face with one out in the world, yeah, my reaction would be, holy shit, that's a big fucking snake, and that would live with me for a while. These guys, they're like, oh, run away, and then they get back on the boat, and they're just like, well, half our guys got slaughtered by giants. That's, That's, I guess that's just going to happen. You're going to get that. And that's the problem, is that none of this is treated with the wonder or the majesty or the weight of it. The fact that they have to sail into hell, and they're all just like, oh, we just take the next right? All right, whatever. And as I said, that realization at the end is helpful, and it does recontextualize some of what you've seen, but not enough. Because what it's trying to create for us is that Odysseus isn't making these choices because of his ego. He's making them because he has now a Captain Ahab-like obsession with getting his people home and getting them home safe, trying to basically run away from this guilt that he's feeling. And this is where the real big twist comes into play.
Shh, that's right. I'm your dad. Your gentle suburban dad. Oh, what a twist. Shh.
Remember how I said that Zendaya is not actually playing Aphrodite, but she appears to him in the form of Aphrodite? That is true. What it turns out is that Zendaya's character was just some girl in the city that Matt Damon's character watched be captured and beheaded. An innocent person that, because of his choice, died, and her face has been haunting him. She isn't actually Aphrodite. She is the face that he has assigned to her because it's the face of his ultimate guilt. So, again, brilliant. Love that. But here's the problem. If you want that to be the case, that every choice he makes is this constant attempt to run from his punishment, to run from his guilt, that's great. In fact, that's very Greek. That is a huge thing in Greek mythology. The idea that you can't escape your fate. You can try, you can think you're smarter than the gods, but they are going to smack you down. Just ask Oedipus how that works out when you try to defy them. But to not see that progression, to not see him getting more and more desperate and more broken and more, just freaked out the longer it goes, he plays everything just this very kind of ho-hum, okay, yeah, it's just another story, as opposed to a continuous block in his, continuous step in this road that he has to kind of humble himself before he can move on. He has to accept his punishment. You want to see this done well? You really want to see this done well? Go watch. Now, admittingly, you have to watch 7 seasons of television for it, but watch Star Trek Voyager, because that is essentially the arc of Captain Janeway. For those who don't know, in the pilot episode, it's Captain Janeway who makes the choice that ultimately strands her crew in this unknown portion of space, 75 years away from home. And as the series progresses, we see that guilt of that choice is influencing every other choice that she's making. Why she does things, why she takes increasingly dangerous risks, why she's willing to put herself in danger, because she feels that guilt, and it gets bigger and bigger. She becomes basically a Captain Ahab, but for her own choices. And that is this kind of story done really well. And unfortunately, that's not the case here. Now, I will say, in the interest of fairness, that all the shit happening back home in Ithaca with, his house being invaded by suitors all trying to convince Penelope, played by Anne Hathaway, to marry them, and Tom Holland as Odysseus' son, trying to stave them off and trying to find his dad, Robert Pattinson, as this, really dipshit suitor who chickened out on going on to war all those years ago is kind of the lead asshole. You have John Leguizamo as this blind mentor. All great shit. That all works really well, and those actors are really doing some stuff. The more Game of Thrones moments of this movie are the strongest. Unfortunately, they are not the majority of time that we spend. We spend it all in this flat, uninspired, unconnected, and quite frankly, dull adventure that should be the height of adventure. It's one of the first adventures. And again, this is Christopher Nolan's greatest weakness, is he can't, a lot of his movies do this. Think about it. Really think about it. Look, I love Batman Begins and The Dark Knight as much as anybody, but think about it. How's the acting in those? Very subdued, right? The only person who is not subdued is Heath Ledger as the Joker. He's going crazy because he sticks out. Because he is the oddity. He is chaos. So therefore he is allowed to go bigger and be freakier. But everybody else, very, very, subdued. And that's my biggest problem. And I hate to say it, but I don't think I was the only one who had it. Because when the lights came up on this movie, and I was in there with a lot of people. This is one of the more crowded movies I've been to in a little while. When the lights came up, it was dead quiet. Like, nobody talking, nobody like, ooh, ah, you don't get like you get a lot now at the end of these movies where people clap. None of that. The lights came up and everybody very silently got up and left. And I didn't hear any conversation of it as people were leaving. I heard people more trying to communicate with rides or other people, or trying to figure out where the bathroom was. But I didn't hear anybody react to this movie, because I think a lot of people had that same reaction, that they want to like it. There's a lot there to like, but ultimately it's a very boring, and it doesn't connect with an audience. Visually stunning, but emotionally bankrupt. That's this movie, and I feel bad saying it because I wanted to like it, I really did, but what's up there is up there, and it's also sad when you can see why they made the choices they made, but when you put the whole film together, it's like it's the wrong choice, So yeah, so I think that's everything I can really say before I just start going in circles. Kind of a letdown, which is a theme for this year at the movies. So, final grade for the Odyssey. I'm going to be more generous than I really should be. My gut is telling me to go with a C-. But there's enough technical beauty, there's enough good stuff in this to make me go, no, this is a solid C. I'll give it a solid C on this one. And maybe you'll like it and love it. A lot of people loved Oppenheimer. A lot of people loved Dunkirk. A lot of people loved Interstellar. And I had the same problems with all of those. So maybe you'll see it and like it. For me, I saw it. I don't think I ever have a desire to see it again. So there's my opinion. So, all right. So, thank you for coming along with me on this crazy journey. Thanks for listening. Hope you're doing well. And as always, drive safe. And I will see you at the movies.
Brave Odysseus, it's been 20 long years. Regale me with tales of your adventures.
Quit suffocating me. I'm going to Moe's.